Hey. Hi, everyone. My name is Andrea Berez, and I'm a registered dietitian. I've been in the field now for quite some time, and I specialize in working with children and families. And one thing that I have seen that parents always struggle with when they have young kids is meal times, picky eaters. I have two daughters of my own, so I really understand, the struggles that parents go through. I've had to deal with some of these things on my own as well. Before I was a parent and I was working with kids, I think I really had no idea about, kids pickiness and what really goes on at home, with eating and meal times and how crazy it can get. So I'm really happy to be able to talk to you guys today, and I just want to welcome everyone. And if you have any questions, I'm going to be looking, but I will wait till the end to answer any questions. So with that, I'm going to begin. So how do we end these mealtime battles? I know that a lot of you are really struggling with getting your kids to try new foods, with just getting your kids to eat at all. So I'm going to give you a lot of tips and tricks today of really how we could make mealtime and eating time much more pleasant for the whole family. So one thing I first wanted to point out to you is that picky eaters are actually relatively common. So most kids, when they're young, go through some sort of picky stage. And it's really well documented that picky eating can range from anywhere from 8% to 50% of children in a variety of samples. And what does it mean to be picky? So being picky can be characterized by different behaviors. It could be the toddler or the child just eating a limited amount of food, maybe restricting intake of particular food groups like vegetables, just being unwilling to try new foods, or really having a strong preference, which is often leading parents to provide their child a meal that's different from the rest of the family. So let's talk about the facts of toddlerhood. So I'm sure most of you are on here because you have a toddler and you're going through this right now. So what's the first thing that we notice about all toddlers? Toddlers want to exert their independence. They're finally coming into their own. They're realizing that, they can control certain situations. And one thing that is pretty easy to control is food. So that's why it does tend to become an issue, with meal times as kids get into that little toddlerhood stage. Another fact about toddlerhood, which most parents don't realize, is that your rate of growth and weight actually slows during toddlerhood. And because of that, so does the appetite. So let me just sort of portray a picture for you. So with babies, when they're either nursing or they're taking formula through a bottle, they're hungry very frequently, right? They're eating every 2 to 3 hours. That's because babies grow at an extremely high rate, somewhere between, let's say, 20 to 30 grams of weight gain a day, versus toddlers actually really start to slow down. So between the ages of about 1 and 5, toddlers only grow, I'll give you an example, again, in numbers, of 5 to 8 grams of weight per day, which is maybe a quarter, of the growth of a baby. So because of that, their appetite slows down. And parents really don't realize that. Pediatricians don't really hone in or explain that. So most parents believe that their kids should, be eating, as frequently or as much as they do as when they're babies, but that's just not true. What also happens during toddlerhood, kids graze, right? Kids, they look through their cabinets at home to find snacks. Parents are bringing snacks, wherever they go with their kids to, sort of appease them and keep them happy while they go food shopping and, things like that. So kids wind up, kind of snacking on little things throughout the day. And believe it or not, even just having a handful of goldfish for some kids could just be enough to sort of, get them through, for a few hours and not really, actually be that hungry when it comes to dinner time. And again, as I mentioned before, really the key factor here is that toddlers like to test limits, right? So food is definitely something that they can control. And there also is that question is, could it be evolution? is this just, what happens, in life? And probably that's a big part of the answer here. So what actually influences toddlers to become picky? Well, unfortunately, it's some of the things that we do as parents. And again, we don't necessarily realize we're doing it. We just want to make sure our kids are eating, right? That's what our job is as parents. So, so one thing that, often we do is we pressure our kids to eat. It's mealtime. We expect them to be eating. So we, try to get them to eat in any way, shape, or form that we can. I'm going to talk about that, right? Sometimes, we tell our kids that, you have to finish everything that's on your plate or you can't have dessert, right? So in essence, then they get that negative reinforcement, right? That if they don't eat what's on their plate, that they're not going to have dessert. Oftentimes parents, are very hesitant about, offering any kind of junk food. My kids, I don't serve cookies in my house, or, I don't believe in giving, any sugar to my kids. And that can actually backfire in the long run. So, those kids sometimes can be the kids at the birthday party who just wind up, being in front of the bowl of chips, or, in front of the bowl of M&Ms and like eating, everything that's there in sight, because, they're not used to having that food around. And when they can get it, they want to eat as much of it as they can. Also, interestingly enough, we've actually realized over the last 30 or 40 years, when it comes to introducing new foods, that actually waiting to introduce foods that have texture in it. So things like, soft meats or stews. So things that, aren't real tough to eat, but still have some texture in it. If we wait to offer those foods till kids are a little bit older, closer to 9, 10, 11, months of age, even up to a year, we found that waiting on introducing those foods can actually cause them to be picky. It's not really quite clear why, but there is that window that's really important. So we really should be starting to offer some textured foods between the ages of like 6 to 8 months. And actually having siblings is a protective factor. So I'm sure a lot of you, who have other children have noticed that your younger children might eat even better than your older kids do, because they're mimicking your older kids. They're watching them. Your older kids are sort of like role models to them. Older moms seem to be a protective factor. And one thing that we speculate about that is that moms who are, in their more like mid to late 30s or even older, they tend to have a little bit, better eating habits. They've sort of like established, better eating, in their life over the long run. And so they tend to also, be better role models because of that. And vice versa, when parents have unhealthy eating habits, or if you as a parent have experienced, let's say, an eating disorder in your life, that can also, have a negative effect on your children's behavior. So keep these things in mind, as I go through this talk. So I just thought it would be sort of funny to show some of these pictures. I'm sure all of you have experienced, a lot of these tactics to get our kids to eat, right? So that little girl who's holding her mouth, she's like, there's no way I'm taking a bite of this spaghetti. I don't have the tomato on here. Or the mom, chasing her kid around the house with peas. Come on, Tommy, you have to eat your peas. I'm going to make you eat them, or else you can't have anything else. Or how many of us, put screens in front of our kids to get them to eat, right? Or, your kid just completely refusing to eat a new food, just making those faces. Some kids even gag or vomit if they're offered a new food. So I want to, help you guys try to reverse some of these tactics so we can make eating time a lot more pleasant. So I wanted to first talk to everyone about Ellen Satter's division of responsibility in feeding, okay? This is really our Bible when it comes to pediatric nutrition, and teaching, families and parents about just about the rules of feeding and what they should follow. Ellen Satter, she's a wonderful woman. She was one of the first pediatric dietitians in the field. She spent a lot of her career really focusing on behaviors around eating, not just, nutrition, but kids' behaviors with eating. And she's done a lot of research when it comes to this. And her responsibility of in feeding, is still used today, and it will always be used because those rules really never change. So I would just want to first and foremost discuss what some of these roles are, and why, as parents, it's important to understand these roles. And unfortunately, again, when you go to your regular pediatrician, they're not always discussing these things with you. So what is our role as a parent when it comes to feeding our kids? As parents, our role is to provide the structure, the support, and the opportunities to eat. Meaning that we have to make sure that we keep our kids, on a good schedule, so that, our kids know and when to expect they can be eating. And that's important. And I know for a lot of parents, it's really hard to keep their kids on the schedule if they have, a lot going on, they're working, they might not always be, there to feed their kids if they have other people coming in, like babysitters, or they're in a daycare situation, or whatever it might be. But it's really important to provide some sort of structure, and I'll get into that a little bit more when we talk about toddlers. But it's really our kids' responsibility to choose how much they want to eat and whether or not they want to eat at all. So it's not our responsibility as parents. I know some of you are probably going like, whoa, oh my goodness. So you're telling me like I don't have to force my kid to eat? That's right. You don't. You just have to provide enough opportunities. So let's say, we provide our kids, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and 2 to 3 snacks, during the day. If they eat, let's say, 1 meal and 2 good snacks, that's great. So really, in essence, what I'm trying to say is that, you don't have to expect your child to eat every time you prepare a meal for them. Okay? Just like us, we're not always hungry at every mealtime, right? And that's okay. And that's the same thing when it comes to our kids as well. Okay? So let's say you guys are sitting down to dinner at 6:30 and your, child is just throwing a tantrum. They don't want to sit there. Maybe they just, ate an hour and a half ago. It's okay to actually, say to your daughter, Katie, if you're not hungry, that's okay. You don't have to eat. You can save their food. Or, she'll have another eating opportunity before bedtime. And maybe she'll have a larger snack at that time, like yogurt and fruit. So just giving you some examples of what I mean, that we don't have to feel forced to make our kids eat every time we think they should be eating, okay? So that's really important, as our kids become toddlers, and it lasts throughout childhood. So I really want you guys to let this seep into your brains and into your heart, okay? Again, we are responsible for what? So what kind of foods we give our kids, right? So we decide what we're going to make for that meal, right? We decide what we want to offer our kids, as snacks. We decide that maybe we're all going to have, ice cream and go out for ice cream one day together as a family. That's okay too. But it's up to us to decide what we are going to give our kids to eat, right? We also decide when we're eating. Like I said, keeping that schedule is important. And also, where we eat too, right? So it's important that we, try to keep our eating times, our meal times, to the kitchen or the dining room, right? We really want to try to avoid letting our kids just eat wherever they want. I mean, I've seen parents, let their kids eat in their bedroom or take their, food to the couch and watch TV. I've seen some really crazy tactics with parents, just trying to get their kids to eat. But again, it's only our child's responsibility to decide how much or whether they want to eat. Children have very innate hunger and fullness cues. So from the moment that kids are born, they know when they're hungry and when they're full. So we need to really learn to respect that, okay? And again, I know it's difficult when we hear messages from pediatricians constantly, like, what is your kid eating? How much are they eating? Are they gaining enough weight, right? Especially when they're little. So, for a parent who has a child that might not be gaining, weight adequately, I know how stressful that can be. And we think, well, if we try to follow these rules, then how are they going to eat enough? Well, again, I've been, working with parents and families for many, many years. And I know that it's really difficult when you hear these messages all the time. I need to get my kids to eat. I need to get them to gain weight. But if you're patient and you give it time, your kids will actually eat. Okay. So what are our feeding jobs again? They're to decide what we're going to eat, right? Choosing and preparing the food, providing regular meals and snacks, making eating times pleasant, right? So what happens when there's chaos going on at mealtime? So everybody's screaming and we're yelling at each other, or the dog is running around and barking. That could be very distracting to a kid, right? So we really want to make sure that we keep eating time to eating time and everything else to other times, right? We have to, show children what they have to learn about food and mealtime behavior, right? So we have to be good role models too. So it's important for us to sit down and eat with our kids when we can, right? Because I know we can't expect to do that every single meal. And I know a lot of people struggle with that. Well, I just want to get Katie to finish her meal. Like, I have to go get dressed. I have to go take a shower. I have to get ready for work. We get that, right? That's a reality. We can't be sitting with our kids and having, really nice, relaxing meals all the time. But when you can, please do it, because your kids will be much more apt to try new foods. They'll be much more apt to have really nice, behavior at mealtime, to actually sit and talk, and take time to eat. Another thing that, again, I can't emphasize enough is when I talked about grazing. So we really have to be very careful about letting our kids just graze on food and snacks constantly throughout the day. So again, I know if you're out and about, or you have to be on a work call and you just want to keep your kid quiet, so you throw them a bunch of puffs. I get that. Like, I've been in those positions as two guys. So I'm not saying that we have to be perfect every time, but as much as you can, really try to avoid letting your kids just snack all throughout the day. Because again, just little bits can actually fill up those little tiny tummies really quickly. So, if you're, let's say, on your way home from work and daycare, and, your kid is, screaming and crying, they don't want to get in the car seat, and you just decide, you know what, like, I'm just going to give them, a package of, peanut butter crackers, and that'll keep them quiet, right? Then we get home and you're making dinner and you sit down and you make a nice meal and you expect, your child to sit and eat with you. They're probably not going to want to eat because they're not hungry. So instead, find other ways that, you can kind of make that ride home quiet, right? Or not quiet, but less distracting, or, just, easier on both of you guys. Find songs that your child likes, bring a special toy in the car, have some books in the car for your child. So there's definitely other ways that we can do to appease our kids without always throwing food at them. Okay. So I just want to make sure that you guys understand that. And again, if, we, really kind of stay out of, forcing our kids to eat, our children will grow up to get the bodies that are right for them. Okay. And again, our children's eating jobs are they'll eat when, they're hungry. They'll eat the right amount of food according to their own hunger and appetite. And they'll grow predictably, and they'll learn to behave well at the table. So I'm going to take some time now, and most of the time that we'll be spending together for the rest of this hour, we'll be talking about a lot of tips for getting our kids to, try new foods, getting them to be a little bit more behaved at mealtime. So one thing that is, always like the number one factor that I always talk to parents about, especially with like older babies or young toddlers, that you have to keep offering and re-offering new foods. So kids go through phases. So let's say you're offering Joe, carrots, for the first time, right? As a baby, most babies will try anything. But then let's say at 10 months, you offer her, a raw baby carrot, and she just sort of plays with it, throws it on the floor, and you're like, oh, I guess she doesn't like it. And then you just decide, you know what? She's never going to eat a carrot. She didn't like it this time. Why should I offer it again? That actually creates a picky eater. So we have to realize that it can take our children up to 10 times to try something. Okay. And I remember going this through with my own kids. I remember my daughter, taking a piece of steamed broccoli and just, sort of playing with it and sniffing it and maybe putting it up to her mouth. And she threw it on the floor. Well, kids use all of their senses when they're trying new food. So sometimes we don't realize that, but we do have to, allow our children to really experience all the qualities about that food. It's not just about putting it in their mouth, chewing it, and eating it. They need to feel it and see the characteristics and smell it. So we just have to keep re-offering. Eventually your child will like that broccoli. They'll like that carrot. It might take a year and a half. That's okay. Just keep putting it, into, the rotation. Okay. Presentation is also okay. So I wanted to show you guys something. So look at how pretty this is. Oh, I lost my pepper. So you see how I made this? These are little circles of peppers and I put hummus in the middle. Looks so nice, right, guys? So sometimes, when we actually take, a couple extra minutes to prepare our food and make it look appealing, our kids will probably be more likely to eat it, right? It actually took me less time to cut up this pepper than it did to, cut a pepper into slices, believe it or not. So I just cut it into rounds. It took me like 10 seconds and another 30 seconds to, make it look nice on the plate and put the hummus in there. So, I'm just saying that we might not always have the time to make, these, lovely presentations, but when you do, just try to make an effort when you can, because your kids, will appreciate that. And when things look nice and they look appealing, just like, when we go out to dinner, right? We don't want a bunch of mush on our plate, right? We want it to look nice. Like, I love when I go out to dinner and they make, a pretty, round, mound of rice. Like they'll take a cup and shape the rice and then they'll layer it with the veggies and they'll layer it with the protein. It just looks so beautiful, and I can't wait to take that first bite. Right. But sometimes when I'm home and I'm just throwing my food on the plate, like I'm just eating it because I know I should be eating it. Right. So presentation definitely helps, guys. All right. So let's see what else here. Oops. Okay. Eliminating distractions is big, and I'm going to actually save that for its own slide. Okay. I talked about being messy. So again, all of those sensory qualities about food are really important. Guys, your kids are going to get messy when they eat. Just expect it. Okay. Put a towel down, put a mat down underneath their chair, because that's what kids do. They get messy. They want to feel that food. They want to sense every characteristics of that food. Okay. Don't be interrupting them, every time they take a bite and wiping their face, right? Because then they're going to become aversive, to finishing a meal and and trying that new food, right? Just let them eat. Just give them 5, 10, 15 minutes. Let them eat their food. Then you can clean up. Then you can give them a wipe. They can wipe their own face if they like to wipe their own face, or you can wipe their face at the end, but just wait till the end of the meal. Okay. Sometimes making meals family style will help kids want to do, eat, a variety of food. And that means what family style means is that you just bring the whole serving dish to the table and each person actually helps themselves to what they want. So kids, again, they like to have control, right? So this is just a way to give them a little bit of control. So, put the bowl of rice, put the bowl of, string beans and, put some chicken, on the table and let them take what they want. Right. So, and if they choose not to eat that piece of chicken that night, guys, it's okay. Okay. Because we're going to talk about this in a few extra steps, but, overall kids will get, a good balance and get what they need. They don't always have to eat every single food group at every single meal. Okay. Sometimes showing them someone cool likes the food will make them want to eat it too. So let's say, your kid loves Paw Patrol, right? So, maybe show them like a Paw Patrol character, eating, a piece of pepper. Like, look at what they're eating. Like, isn't that really cool? Don't you want to eat that too? And I love it. I love it when those kid shows or those like kid cartoons and those, videos, of the stuff that kids love, all of their favorite characters, and they're, eating healthy foods, right? I always compliment like the directors, of those shows. I've actually sent them emails before saying, I love that you're showing them eating healthy food. Because kids will be much more likely to want to try something new if they see like that cool character eating it, right? So keep that in mind too. Okay. It's also okay to meet them halfway. So a lot of parents do struggle with this too. One thing that I find helps, if you find that your child is really picky or really resistant to trying something new, maybe have something on the table that that they'll always eat. So if you know that Julia, loves bread, right? And she'll always eat bread, but she might not try that piece of lemon chicken that you made tonight. If she sees the bread on the table, at least it's something comfortable for her. At least you'll know she'll eat something, right? Even if she doesn't try that piece of chicken. Or offer your kids two choices. It's okay. Again, I'm not telling you to cater to your kids, right? I don't want you making them separate meals every night. But you can offer them two choices. So let's say, you're planning, a meal for that night, right? And that's the night before. And you can say, to Kyle, okay, Kyle, like, mommy either is going to make roast beef or we're going to have, turkey burgers. You can make the choice of what we're going to have that night, or even let's say, you and your husband are going out to dinner that night. And so, it is just going to be, Kyle eating by himself, and you can offer him two choices at that time too. You can say, Kyle, okay, you can have pasta with sauce, or you can have, rice and chicken. So you can, these are your two choices. This is what mommy's offering you, you choose what you want, and he may say, I don't want to choose any. That's okay too. Then you can say to him, well, I guess you're just not hungry. That's okay. So that's another point I want to make to you guys too. Okay. If your kid, is sitting at the table and they're throwing a tantrum, right? Or they're screaming and crying, or they're doing anything that they can to get out of that chair, then end the meal. It's not worth it. It's not worth the stress. It's not worth the aggravation. It just means he's not hungry. That's okay. Go let him play. Go let him watch his TV, right? Because in 2 hours you're going to offer something else, right? So if you find that a lot of kids just sort of peter out at dinner time, I find that a lot, and I see a lot of parents complain about that. Like, why can't my kid just eat dinner like the rest of us? Like, I spend so much time making this meal, and so sometimes I say to them, well, what did he have to eat that day, right? Well, he had oatmeal and fruit in the morning, and then he had a string cheese for a snack, and then he had chicken fingers and French fries for lunch, and then he had yogurt and fruit as another snack, and then he had peanut butter crackers. Well, that's a lot of food, right? 6 o'clock rolls around, Brian's just not going to be hungry. That's okay. Don't stress out about it. I'm telling you. I'm giving you permission to say it's okay to end that meal. And then if he's hungry, let's say it's 7 o'clock and right before bed, then you can give him something that you're comfortable with at that time. Maybe you can, offer him a bowl of cereal. Or offer him half a sandwich, right? But I'm giving you permission to say you do not have to force your child to eat that dinner if they're not hungry. Okay? No, that's a hard message to hear, but you can call me and you can say, Andrea, I'm so stressed out. My kid is just not eating dinner. It's been 4 nights in a row. And I'm going to go through his diet like I did just now. And I'm going to tell you, he ate a lot of food today. He's just not hungry. It's okay. I am here to take the pressure off of you guys, okay? Okay, so let's see. So I do want to talk about something called food chaining. I'm going to show you a slide about that. But food chaining is something that a lot of feeding therapists use. So for kids who do have some major sensory issues or texture issues, they will go through a process called food chaining. Now, I actually use food chaining when I work with a lot of kids as well. Because I find, and again, I'll explain this to you here, that Eating healthy, it doesn't happen overnight. It will take some time. And it's best to, ease your child into the foods that you want them to eat. So a quote by one of the feeding specialists who has written a lot of books about feeding picky eaters and food chaining. Her name is Sherry Frager, and she explains food chaining in which picky eaters are slowly offered foods that are similar to those that they like until they gradually expand their palate. So for instance, if your child likes French fries, right, offer them a different kind of French fry, like maybe a sweet potato fry, or maybe a home-baked fry. Then you can move on to, something that is in that same food category, but a little bit different, right? So maybe we try a roasted potato then. And when he or she is comfortable with that, you can move on to baked potatoes, followed by maybe mashed potatoes, and then maybe we add a little flavor, something different. So we can maybe try some gravy then. So once your kid, likes maybe a different flavor with that food, we might maybe try like potato pie, and eventually, this is how we change. So we just kind of move from one food, change, the variation of the food, change the appearance, change maybe the taste or the flavor of the food. Eventually, you're going to get your kids to be eating quiche. So it works. It takes time and it takes patience. Okay, but for a child who is really just a little bit picky, doesn't have major sensory issues, for that kid, it actually works pretty quickly. So I actually see kids who I do chaining with, like eating, new foods, 3 or 4 or 5 new foods within 3 weeks. That's pretty good, right? And one thing that I always make sure I tell parents too, when you do this process, you want to make it positive for the child. So they want something to look forward to. So I usually recommend, let's get Sarah, a little container she can decorate, or maybe a treasure box, right? Something that's really cool. And she can collect tickets or tokens, every time she tries a new food, so that it motivates her to want to continue trying new foods. And every so often, let's say every 4 or 5 tokens or tickets that she collects, she, can get something, for that. Of course, I try to stay away from food rewards. But, spending time, and things that are, nominal, like often are most appreciated by your child. So it might be just spending quality time with mommy. Maybe we go to a movie together, or maybe we do a special activity together, or maybe your child gets to get a sleepover. Maybe they get to stay up 10 more minutes that night, or 10 more minutes of screen time. So make it positive. It will work. Okay. Don't force your children to eat food, if they really don't like it. So if you have offered, let's say, steak to your child like 7 or 8 times, and they just don't want that, they cry every time they see it on their plate, maybe it's just a food that they don't like. That's okay. You've done your job. You've offered it to them enough times, right? But if he's eating eggs, or he's eating chicken, or he's eating turkey, he's getting other things from that food group, right? So we don't have to worry that he's not eating steak, right? Not everyone is going to love all the foods that are out there, right? Do you love every single food that's out there? I know I don't, right? Personally, I'm not really a huge steak person. I don't really love the texture of it, but I love seafood. I love chicken. So it's okay, right? Same thing goes with your kids. If they like a couple of different foods from each food category, then you've done your job. That's great. Okay. So what about our veggies? Well, we're always trying to get our kids to eat our veggies. So what do we do, right? Well, like I said, we have to keep trying and reoffering. But sometimes, changing the way that we serve our veggies can entice our children. So let's say, we've offered, John, sauteed broccoli, a bunch of times. He doesn't seem to like it, but maybe we try roasting it. Maybe we try adding a little cheese to it. Maybe we try raw broccoli with dip. So sometimes you just have to, try it in different ways, and they may be more likely to try it, in a different way. Also, talk about the health benefits of the food, right? Well, this is why we like to eat our broccoli, because if it's green. You know what the green helps us do? it helps us fight all of those bad things that are in our system, right? So, like, I don't even know what's popular now in terms of like boys and like, what they watch and, the good guys, right? But think about like what one of those like good guys is who fights the bad guys, right? And say like, well, that guy, loves to eat broccoli because he's fighting off all, the bad guys. Well, it's the same thing that goes in your system when you eat broccoli. It makes you strong and you're fighting off all of those germs, right? So it's always good to talk about the health benefits of the food too. Okay. So number 12. So what does it mean to offer irrelevant choices? Okay, I want to go back to what I've been saying all along is that kids love to control. As toddlers, as they get older, they want to control more and more things. So sometimes finding something, in the kitchen at mealtime that your kids could, take control of, that really doesn't mean much, to the meal at all, could be very helpful. Like, for example, maybe your child just loves to eat on the blue plate and they only want to eat on the blue plate. Fine. So just keep a bunch of blue plates around. Let your kid have his meal on a blue plate, right? Or your daughter just has to use that purple fork every time she eats, right? You want to make sure that, you have a purple fork around every time, right? So buy a bunch of them, Don't get yourself into a bind where all of a sudden you don't have that purple fork and she just doesn't want to eat. So I know these things sound silly, but if it's something that they can control and it's not a big deal and it gets them to eat, then just do it, right? Makes your kid happy. Okay. All right. Let's see what else here. Oops. Let's go back to the slide. Okay. Oh, dip solves everything. Who, what kid doesn't love to dip in ketchup or, ranch dip? Some kids just love dip. I'm not saying that they should be like eating a bottle of ketchup every day, right? But a little dip can sometimes solve a big issue. So if your kid likes to dip, put dip on their plate every time, you offer them food. Put a little hummus, put a little bean dip, put a little ranch dip, put a little peanut butter. So nothing harmful in doing that if your child is more likely to eat that way, right? What about no thank you bites? So again, we as parents, we want our kids to try something new. We're happy when they do, but what do we do if they really, just tend to like refuse constantly? You can ask them to say, we'd really like you to take like 2 or 3 no thank you bites. Can you do that for me? Just take a bite of the food. If you don't want it, that's okay. You just spit it out into the napkin. But if we can try to do that 2 or 3 times, that would, make me happy that, you tried something. So, for some kids it works really well. For others it doesn't, but, you can certainly try it. Okay. Number 15. So when I talk about giving clear praise, what I'm referring to is just being careful about how you praise your child, okay? You don't want to praise your child based on how you feel about something, okay? So you never want to say to your child, like, Sarah, like, I'm so glad you ate your broccoli. That makes mommy feel so happy. I'm so happy that you ate your broccoli. It makes me feel so good. Because then she's just doing it to appease you and to make you feel good. She's not doing it because she really wants to try it, right? It sends the wrong message. So instead, you can just say, say she eats her piece of broccoli at dinner, you can say, Sarah, I'm so glad you ate the broccoli. Did you like it? But just really avoid putting you in the picture there. Does that make sense? I just want to make sure that you guys understand that. So just make sure you're very clear about, praising your child on what they did on their actual act, but not on them doing it because it makes you feel good. Okay. Eating the rainbow. Okay. So I love to play games with kids. I do it with my own kids. I do this with all the kids that I work with. So, make it fun. Maybe give them a cute little sheet. I can give you guys some like resources where you can find like lots of cool, little guides and little charts where kids can actually keep track, of what they're eating, right? So am I eating the rainbow? So there's lovely like charts and sheets where, you have all the different colors, and, every time your kid eats a different color, they can check it off. Oh, I had, blue today because I ate a blueberry. I had orange today because I had an orange pepper, right? And it makes them feel proud, right? So it makes them feel proud that they're eating different colors. So that's just a great way to make it fun for kids and kind of make it a game. All right. Let your kids help anytime they can. I know a lot of you really don't want your kids mucking up your kitchen, right? You don't want them making a mess. You just want to get dinner done, but you'd be surprised when you get your kids involved in just the little things, they may be much more apt or interested to actually try the food. So let's say you're making a salad that night, you can just let your kids toss it, right? Let them shake it up or put their hands in there. If they're clean, toss the salad. It makes it fun for them. They might actually want to try it then because they got their hands in it a little bit. Take your kids food shopping with you. I know that it becomes such a pain, right? And I'm not saying you have to do this every single time, right? But once or twice a month, take your kids shopping with you. Bring them down the produce aisle. Let them look at all the different fruits and veggies that are there. They might not even realize that there's so much variety out there. And let them choose something new to try that week. Okay? I know that that's not going to entice every child to try something, but a lot of kids will be much more apt to try something new if they get involved a little bit. Okay? And keep portions small, guys. All right? So, just like our eyes are much bigger than our stomach, the same thing for kids. Kids have little tummies. They can't be eating as much food as we do. It could be overwhelming to throw a big plate of food that we might eat, in front of our child. So use kid-sized plates. Really, the goal or the rule of thumb is offer your child a tablespoon of food for every year that they are for each food group, right? So if you're dealing with, a little 1-year-old, they don't need much, right? A little bit that big, of each food group, on their plate. That's a little bit of food. They don't need to eat much more than that. And if you pile it on, they're going to just be too overwhelmed. Some kids, that just turns them off to eating. So keep it small. And then if you see they clean their plate, then just add a little bit more on in the same amounts. Okay. All right. Okay, so we talked a lot about this already, being a good role model, right? Staying calm. Okay. Guys, really, I can't emphasize enough how much you just need to be calm at mealtime. So kids, they pick up on our stress. Okay, so we need to be calm. We're calm. And if you see your kid is like really riling you up, throwing a tantrum, step out of the room, guys. Don't let them see you get stressed and how many times have you guys just had an explosion on your children, right? Why aren't you eating this? Oh my God, I can't take it anymore, right? Well, that makes them even more stressed than we are. Just step out of the room, okay? All right. So just real quickly, I want to show you guys, a little bit more about food chaining, right? So this is like chaining. I'm going to show you here about chaining like a chicken nugget to a tilapia. So maybe your kid will only eat McDonald's nuggets, right? So one thing you can do is, offer them a different kind of chicken nugget. Like, when you're home, buy a frozen Perdue nugget, make that nugget. Once they like that, maybe we can try making a homemade chicken nugget, right? A little breading, a little egg, a little flour, and bake it. Then we can move on to breaded fish, and so on. And finally, we're going to get our kids to eat a piece of fish, right? So there's all different ways that we can chain, okay? And just really, lastly, I want to just emphasize the distractions. When we are constantly throwing screens in front of our kids to eat, then they're just going to get used to that. And I know that, we're so busy and we have so much to do. And, we just want to, keep our kids happy. I get that, right? And nobody has to be perfect. But also, if you feel like you're in this rut and you're doing it constantly, there's ways that, that we could, sort of get you out of this situation, right? So, and I can help you with that. So it's not the end of the world, if you're like, oh my God, I'm always like putting my iPad in front of my child. It's not the end of the world, guys. Okay, I promise you that we'll be able to work you out of that situation, right? And it's okay with doing that once in a while. And last but least, I just wanted to show you guys. This is a handout or a slide from what we call the SOS approach to feeding, which is what feeding therapists use. And I just really wanted you guys to understand, because for some of you out there, you may really have a very difficult feeder. And there is a big difference, guys, between picky eaters and problem feeders, okay? So if you really, truly find that your child is just completely refusing to eat, or they're vomiting and gagging all the time, or, you can't bring them out to eat ever, you can't put a new food on their plate, they just have an explosion and throw the food everywhere, so if it's really becoming a problem, then that's more than just a picky eater. And in that instance, I would definitely recommend seeing a feeding specialist, and that's what they specialize in doing, is desensitizing your child. So there is help out there for all of you guys and for every problem that you have. I promise that, okay? When you're really struggling, contact a dietitian in your area. Eatright.org is our national organization. You can locate a dietitian there. Or please feel free to contact me. I would love to help you out. All right. Thank you for taking the time to spend with me tonight. I hope this was helpful. Okay. So I think we may have a few questions. Okay. So I have a question from Stephanie. Hi, Stephanie. You said, are frequent snacks a good idea, or will it just make them pickier during dinner? So again, we just have to be careful about what kind of snacks we offer, right? So, if it's like constantly offering our kids carby snacks like goldfish and crackers and cookies all throughout the day, then that definitely, could make them, just not want to eat. So it could affect their appetite. So it doesn't necessarily make them pickier, but it could just make them not hungry. Okay, so just be careful and really try to set the structure when it comes to meal times. And you have another big question. You said you have a nephew that's very picky with food. He only likes to eat rice with butter and bread. So what are the big nutrients to keep an eye out for kids who often don't get enough of that? Okay, so he might fall into the category of being a problem eater or a selective eater. So for kids who, only eat, let's say, one food group, like you said, like the white foods, that could be a problem. What I would suggest is try to definitely get a good, multivitamin in there. So what they may be missing out on. So when you have carby foods, you'll get a lot of energy, right? And you'll get B vitamins. You may get some fiber if they're whole grains, but we might be missing out on a lot of minerals. So when we're not eating those protein foods, we might be missing out on calcium and vitamin D, which comes from our dairy foods, iron, zinc, magnesium, and other minerals that come from our protein foods. So in those cases, definitely get a good multivitamin with minerals, not just like a gummy, but a good like chewable vitamin or a liquid. And I can always give you some recommendations. And if your sister or sister-in-law, is really having trouble getting Johnny to eat other food groups, I would suggest at that point maybe seeing a feeding specialist. Okay. Oh, you're welcome, Stephanie. Anytime. And just want to let you guys know that, if you want to work directly with me, you can contact me on Kounsel. And my profile link is there at the bottom. Okay. So does anyone else have any other questions for me right now? Okay, I don't see any other questions. So again, thank you guys so much. I do have a question here from Anna. So she says, what causes a child to be picky only with her parents? What can we do to reduce this pickiness? Eat out less, have her help cook, etc. Well, I do want to broach one subject here. And I've seen this a lot in the last year or two. So, and I don't know if this is, you fall into this category, this situation, but I've seen that there's it's been a hard time for parents during this pandemic, okay? So, kids really haven't been exposed to other kids. They haven't been out, right? We weren't taking our kids out of the house. So, and if your child doesn't have any other siblings, then they're only with you all the time, right? And so I would never blame you on causing your child to be picky, but it may just be the fact that, they've just been in one environment this whole time. Or that, you were so busy working that, you kind of did whatever you can to make your kids eat. And so you couldn't really worry about offering new foods or making these gourmet meals. You just wanted to get your kid to eat. So I've seen that a lot, like I said, in the last year or two. And I'm finding that the more kids are starting to go out, see friends more, go to daycare, that they're starting to try new things. But you're not causing your child to be picky, so I don't want any parent to feel blame here. But there's a lot of ways that we could really entice our kids to get new food. So again, if you're a picky eater yourself, what can we really expect of your child? So you have to be a good role model. Make sure you're eating a good variety. Make sure you're eating healthy, right? And really try as often as you can, especially, if your child is home a lot, try to get them out when you can. Try to get them to, yes, like you said, a restaurant. Try to get them to help cook, right? Try to get them around other kids. That's really important. Because kids, and it's been shown that kids, like, for example, who are in daycare or in preschool and they eat meals and snacks there, they do tend to be more apt to try new things because other kids are doing it too. Okay. So really the goal is, to try to get your kids, out a little bit more, not just home. So I hope that helps. Mina has asked a question. She said, "Hey, Dad here. I have a question. How can I get my kids to eat sauces and dips and meat? I had not had a chance to watch the whole presentation. Oh, I'm sorry." That's okay. Thank you for the question, though. Just keep reoffering, right? If you've tried something once or twice, don't stop then. Offer it 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 more times, right? Make sure also, I didn't really touch on this too much too, but make sure that you give kids foods that are flavorful. I know like a lot of parents are really nervous, especially with older infants or young toddlers, to give anything spicy or to give food that they're eating. Kids actually like flavor like we do, guys. So, if you're going to give your kid bland stuff all the time, why would you expect them to want to eat the food? So make sure it tastes good. But yeah, it might take some time, just like with any other food, but just keep reoffering it. As I promise you, it might not be tomorrow, it might not be in 3 months, but hopefully a year from now, your children will be eating more of the foods you enjoy. Okay. Any other questions? I don't see anything else coming through. I'm going to stay on a couple more minutes just to see if anything else comes through. So Minas has another question. He says, "Thank you." Another question is, "Can you share recipes for picky eaters that you've seen work over and over?" I get this question a lot. So there's not really one recipe that I suggest, but I do recommend, kind of going with what your child likes. So if your child likes to dip, they like sauces, then keep doing that, right? For some kids who like combination foods, like, they like a chili, or let's say they like tacos, then just keep offering foods maybe in that sort of style to them. Sometimes, and I'm not a proponent of hiding food, right, at all, but sometimes making smoothies, right, or making soups out of things. So, because they taste yummy and, they're easy to eat. Sometimes kids like foods that way too, that they might not necessarily eat in the whole food form. But also, maybe trying foods that you might not necessarily eat at mealtime, at snack time. So I always tell parents, like, if your child wasn't really hungry, like at lunch, offer them and reheat their lunch up again at snack time. That's okay too. I find also like serving different kinds of nut and seed butters. A lot of kids like that, like sun butter or soy butter, or peanut butter, of course. Sometimes cheeses, those things with with crackers, with muffins. Kids will like that a lot too. So I hope that helps. But I'm always here, to help you guys find new ideas, new recipes. I have tons of them. So again, reach out to me. If you really feel like you're struggling, I will help you guys out. Okay. Let's see if any other questions come through. Okay, question from Diane. She says, thank you for the presentation. I'm really loving it. I have a question. Is there anything I can do to actually prevent my child from becoming a picky eater? Yes, there is. So I don't know how old your child is, but if you start following these rules from the get-go, you will most likely prevent your child from becoming really picky. So first and foremost, make sure that you don't wait too long to offer solids, but don't start too early either. So really, that time frame is between 4 to 6 months to start solids. And also, as kids get older, again, like I said, offer things with flavor. You don't have to offer, that, chicken, pureed with no seasoning in it, right? Make sure that you offer them pureed chicken and throw some garlic salt and throw some Italian seasoning in there. So just make sure that, when you start to offer solid foods, as your baby gets older, it's okay to season it up. Like, for example, you can take the food you're eating and just throw it into a blender. That's fine. Okay. And it's also okay for your child to, take things off your plate. So you can start giving them, as they get older and they can chew better, little bits of food that you guys are eating too. Okay. But don't give up. Like I said, just don't give up on a new food if your child didn't like it the first, second, or third time. Another question from Diane. Is it true that eliminating sugar from your child's diet can help reduce their pickiness? So I don't know if you're referring to starting with fruits over vegetables with babies, because I know a lot of people feel, or a lot of pediatricians recommend to start with things that are a little bit more sour or tart, like vegetables before fruit. It's not really, going to prevent your child, from being picky. The key thing is, offering, a good variety from the get-go. And just making sure, that, again, you avoid, letting your kids graze on a lot of snacks, right? Because those snacks tend to have a lot of sugar and added sugar. Okay. So I hope that answered your question. But no, if we just completely avoid anything with sugar, and remember, fruits have sugar, but they're natural sugars. So they're actually healthy for you. So it's important that kids have fruits. Okay. Okay, let's see. I'll give it another minute or two because time is almost up. Let's see if anybody has any other questions. And Scarlett asked a question. She says, I watched a video on YouTube the other day, and heard that my own eating habits affect my kids. Is that really true? Yes, it is true. Okay, so if you are really picky and you only eat chicken fingers, French fries, pizza, mac and cheese, that's all your kids are going to want to eat too, right? So kids are always watching us, right? They know what we're doing. Same thing about what we're eating. So we have to show our kids that eating, needs to be, fun, right? It needs to be pleasant, and it should be balanced, so make sure that, you eat a good variety. If you're eating a good variety, your kid most likely will as well. Okay. Vice versa, like I mentioned before, if you've had an eating issue in the past, some sort of eating disorder, and you're really having a hard time with that, especially, when your children are young, please make sure you seek help for that, because your kids will pick up on it. Okay. And people who have had eating issues have an increased likelihood that their children will develop, some sort of feeding issue. So please make sure you do get help for yourself too. Okay. And Catherine has a question. She said, what are the big nutrients to keep an eye out for that kids don't often get enough of? Well, it depends on, what your kid tends to go for. So, one thing I'm always really careful about talking to parents about is that is milk, okay? Because some kids love milk, they'll drink milk all the time, or they'll eat yogurt constantly, right? Because that's just what they like. Well, you want to be careful about that because calcium actually could interfere with the absorption of iron. So if you find that your kid is a huge milk drinker or a huge yogurt eater or lots of cheese, that can cause them to be iron deficient. So be careful for that. Okay, vice versa. If your kids tend to be more carby kids, and don't really like their meats, they can be a little bit low in some of the minerals. And one thing that does concern me, if they're not eating a lot of meats or even vegan sources, okay, is that they can become zinc deficient, and zinc is an important nutrient for growth, okay? So those are really key nutrients to be on the lookout for. Okay. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with giving your kid a vitamin. So if you find that your kid is, really not wanting to try a lot of new foods right now, and they're just not getting a lot from all the different food groups, it's okay to give them a vitamin with minerals. Okay. All right, guys, thank you so much for all the questions. I hope that, I answered what I gave you the answers you were looking for. And again, thanks for taking the time to listen to me tonight. And I hope to be meeting with you guys one-on-one at some point. So take care. Have a great night, everybody.